Oof, that Drogo video was a long one, Tom. Let's do something quick and fun this week. Following on from our latest video ranking the kings of the War of the Five Kings, we thought it might be fun to talk about the actual winners of this conflict, since, it clearly wasn't any of the kings of whom the conflict is named for. Note, the list is ranked, so biggest winners at the top and smallest winners at the bottom, with one exception, which I know for sure is going to be rather controversial and open to a good dollop of subjectivity. And now, a quick word from our sponsor. Haha, just kidding. You may have noticed we've stopped doing Star Wars content altogether on this channel. But fear not, those of you who do request Star Wars content on the regular, for we have launched a channel specifically dedicated to Star Wars content over here, originally named Fandome. My Tom, your originality when it comes to naming things knows no bounds. So, if you like Star Wars and want to help your pals over at the Fandome out, please consider heading over, subscribing, and checking out the videos. Thanks guys, and back to the video you actually clicked for. Let's prep our lazy casino metaphors, Tom, and see who's on a hot streak after the War of the Five Kings Weekend Extravaganza!
This ad brought to you by the Stannis Baratheon Luxury Casino, where you'd better bet on red or end up dead.
Disclaimer. The one true king disapproves of gambling in any and all forms. Any attempt at gambling in his realm is punishable by death. The Stannis Baratheon Casino cannot be held responsible for the loss of earnings, heads, or life via burning alive. Please gamble responsibly. Starting us off at number 8, it's our favorite flowery friends, the Tyrells. The Tyrells won a huge jackpot by casting their chips at the right moment in this war. They brought the Reach back into the royal fold and solidified their hold over the throne by putting their best foot forward with Margaery Tyrell and her marriage to two kings that she had both the skills and intelligence to manipulate into serving Tyrell interests. Everything has come up roses for them, right? These kinds of gains should warrant top spot placement, shouldn't they? Well, not quite. The reason the Tyrells have placed all the way down here at the bottom is down to the fact they've kind of strapped themselves to a sinking ship. Post Tywin's death, the Lannister/Baratheon dynasty they are now legally tied to is crumbling around them, and it can't sustain the hits being sent its way. Especially when you've got this moron basically opening up her arms and shouting, "Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough." While they aren't without wiggle room and still do have cards to play, the Roses are currently in a very precarious situation and are very much at risk of losing all of their gains with one misplayed hand or one failed bluff at the poker table. Don't worry though, I'm sure Mace the Ace has a plan to get them out of this dicey situation, with all the Lannisters dropping like flies, Margaery in custody of the High Sparrow, and the Golden Company landing in the Stormlands. Nah, I'm sure he's got this figured out. Why else would they call him Mace the Ace? What's that, Tom? It's a fan name. Oh fuck. Well guys, say hello to House Rain, Tarbeck and Gardiner for me, will you? At number 7, it's the Faith Militant and the High Sparrow. The war caused a lot of unrest and suffering for the small folk. At times like these, it's understandable people turn to faith to get them through it. This is where the Sparrows come in. Their follower count exploded during the war thanks to their charity amidst the suffering, and their influence over the small folk has only been increasing since. With the skilled manipulation of Cersei in allowing the faith to arm once more, and the fact our beloved Manus is perceived to have put his faith in a different god than what is typical of the Westerosi, their leader, the High Sparrow, is very nearly in the position the Tyrells were gunning for, that being the ruler of the Seven Kingdoms by proxy. He's an exceptionally cunning player and has managed to place the nobility between a rock and a hard place, to the degree that not even brilliant minds like Kevin Lannister and Randall Tarley can outright oppose him without risking rebellion. The issue they have is, like the Tyrells, they have tied themselves to the current monarchy and are thus currently on thin ice, albeit with much more wiggle room than the Roses, since they can switch sides and change allegiances with a much better chance of maintaining their gains. However, they are still in a precarious position. It would only take someone competent and stern, or ballsy and ruthless, to put their foot down with force, and they would be forcibly relegated to a benign, unarmed entity once again. We saw this with Cersei in the show, and there are plenty of good candidates in the books who simply wouldn't take this faction shit and put them in their place. Manis, love you. Like the Tyrells, they certainly come out with gains due to the conflict, but like the flowers, the pedestal is already crumbling beneath them, and their window to cash out their winnings is slowly closing. But hey, I'm sure their faith, which was created by an atheist author, will come to their rescue. What's that? It isn't? Well, take a leaf from the Book of Manis and pray harder. It works for the one true king. At number 6, it's a joint pick, and that's Dawn, the Vale, and Euron Greyjoy. By the 7, the Ironborn have made a good list. Tom, the non-Manis simping clones must be getting more sophisticated. You must test me. I may not be the original Liam. The fires will decide. Ow, that burns! Let's at least finish the video first. Ever heard the phrase, sometimes the best course of action is to simply do nothing? These guys epitomize these words that are wise. Try epitoming me now, Tom!
You have done that yourself!
While the lions, the roses, the stags, and the wolves have all run themselves ragged and depleted themselves financially, politically, and militarily at the slot machines, these three factions have all sat on the sidelines and watched, while keeping their coin buckets full and readying themselves to swoop in and take that jackpot as the kings search the floor around them for loose change. The Vale can quite possibly boast the most formidable army in Westeros post-war, now that the Westerlands, the Riverlands, the Reach, the Stormlands, and the North have all taken and/or are in the process of taking a good kicking. Dawn has a bunch of political fractures they can sneak into and widen in their quest to undermine the Baratheon and Lannister dynasty they seek vengeance on, and Euron has the very thing Balon could have done with during his rebellion. That being a fractured and divided realm to strike at with the Ironborn's pent-up frustration of being nearly totally useless under normal circumstances. Which one of these comes out on top of the Aftermath conflict has yet to be decided, but they definitely came out ahead of the 5 kings who actually fought the war. Well played, you lazy assholes. At number 5, titles, of course it's Dany. Dany's gains as a result of this conflict were extremely substantial, and like the previous pick, she didn't even have to do anything. She can swoop in and claim the jackpot once the big players have run out of change. Except, she isn't going to metaphorically swoop in with her metaphorical coins in a metaphorical slot machine. She's going to literally swoop in with her literal dragons and burn everyone who opposes her. The only chance the Seven Kingdoms had against those fire-spitting reptilian rascals was as a united front and their full strength behind the king's cause to hold the will of the people together. But as a result of this war, and despite the facade of reunification between the kingdoms that matter, fuck the Ironborn! The kingdoms are more fractured than ever, and what was once a fiery, defiant chance at repelling the Dragon Queen is now a fizzled ember of which the last vestiges of warmth are derived from the hope that she lacks, and will continue to lack, a suitable naval fleet to transfer her forces to the continent. On top of that, she won the bonus prize in having acquired Barristan the Badass as a result of the division and uncertainty caused by the conflict. Win-win-win for you, Khaleesi! Now you just need to get to Westeros to collect your winnings before they expire. At number 4, it's the guy who can be blamed for starting the war in the first place, so of course he had something to gain from it. Peter the Ladder Baelish. Ooh, not quite the biggest winner, but certainly not out of consideration for that honor. Remember when we said the Vale, thanks to its policy of isolation, could probably now be considered the most formidable regional army with where we're at in the story? Well, guess who's in command of it? Well, he's not officially in command, but he's damn sure pulling the strings of the one who is. On top of that, Baelish managed to use the war to add the Riverlands to his Westerosi playset, and has also acquired the rare Sansa Stark trading card, which, as we all know, can be upgraded to the very OP Key to the North card if played at the correct time and all other Stark cards are out of play, which, as we all know, in turn grants rulership over North. Peter came out of the war in an exceptionally strong position compared to where he was when it started. And unlike the Tyrells, his gains are quite secure, and due to where he is currently residing, is in a position to act with near-on impunity to all other threats besides the others and maybe Dany. Not bad for a lowborn lord and brothel owner, eh? His issue, and why we can't place him higher, is despite having reached the minimum bet threshold to leave the roulette table and cash in his winnings, he's strongly indicated he's going to let it ride. The man has clearly never heard the phrase, quit while you're ahead, and I'm sure this never-ending greed won't come back to bite him on the arse in any way whatsoever. So let's just move on. At number 3, the itsy-bitsy spider came up the water spout, then used a war to sow the seeds of doubt. Out came the chaos and threatened the king's reign, and the itsy-bitsy spider used it for his gain. Of course Varys is all the way up here as one of the biggest winners on the poker table. He spent the whole game bluffing and hanging in there waiting for a good hand. And this war finally gave him good cards and facilitated the perfect conditions for his master plan. So much so that he had to off poor Kevin to maintain the equilibrium the fallout of this conflict had caused. The war destabilized the realm, which is exactly what Varys needed to pave the way for placing Targs back on the throne. Unlike Littlefinger, his assets are also tied up in the new potential management, and thus his gains aren't at risk of being pulled away from him by fresh blood. He's basically playing with house money at the moment. The reason we haven't put him at the very top? Well, despite playing with house money, Varys, unlike Littlefinger, hasn't quite met the minimum bet threshold to leave the table. He's still got to carry on playing his hand before he can cash in his winnings, unfortunately. Can he keep his hot streak hot? Well, that's going to depend on which side of the Dragonfire he finds himself on, isn't it? Let's move on. And at number 2, it's that highly controversial take we mentioned at the beginning, but I've got to address it because it was the thought that sparked the inspiration for the video in the first place. That's right, this isn't a ranked list video with a weak casino analogy tacked on like you initially thought. It's a mini essay, hidden in a ranked list video with a weak casino analogy tacked on. And the pick? Why, it's good old Ned Stark. Sort of. Yes, guys, you heard it right. Sure, he dies before the war begins. It might even be fair to say his death is the primary motivating catalyst, or at the very least a significant contributor. And sure, his house and his bloodline have been wiped to the point of near total eradication. But here's the thing. In the long game, not just the War of the Five Kings, I'm just talking about in general, Ned really has kind of had the last laugh and won. When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die. There is no middle ground. It's one of, if not the most famous quotes of the series. Ned doesn't heed these words, and with how events play out, we are somewhat led to believe in the accuracy of this statement. But do we ever actually take a moment to consider who said those words? Yes, that's right. You see, Ned is George's brilliant double cross on one of the core themes of his story, that honor is a fool's prize. But is it really? Let's explore this a little. I think it's fair to say Tywin is the antithesis of Ned's ideals, right? He's all about ruthlessness, pragmatism, and looking after number 1, which in his case is his house name. And he spits in the face of honor. And when we look at his gains and how quickly he achieves them, we are led to believe this is very much the way to go in the world of Ice and Fire. But what happens when he dies? His power base crumbles, the vultures swoop in to mop up the scraps, and everything he'd worked so damn hard for unravels into a chaotic mess in a very short space of time. The strong and powerful legacy he'd hoped to leave fades into dust, a new power takes its place at the top of the wheel, and the world carries on business as usual without him. Now ask yourself the same question about Ned. What happens when he dies? The North remembers. Despite having lost his head in the first book, despite the damage his son causes with his understandable youthful naivety and poor choices, and despite his family lying cold to the point of extinction for all anyone knows, the North remembers. 5 books in, and almost everyone who once called the Starks their liege lords, apart from you, Bolton and Karstark, you pricks, have refused to throw in the towel. They plot, they scheme, they fight. And it's all because of, and in the name of, good old Ned Stark. Ned's honor and decency, even in death, has actually achieved the very thing Tywin spent his whole life chasing and ultimately failed to attain. A powerful and immortal legacy. The War of the Five Kings tested the strength of the name Lannister, and I think it's fair to say it found it wanting. It did the same for the name Stark, and found it to be nothing short of unbreakable. You'll notice Roose and the Boltons didn't make this list of winners. You may also notice Walder and the Freys are suspiciously absent. That's because the actions of these two individuals and their factions did not merely place them in a tricky, hard-to-wriggle-out-of situation like our favourite roses. Thanks to Ned's legacy, it's pretty much signed their death warrants. Maybe the Menace doesn't beat the Boltons, but he will because he's the fucking Menace. Maybe Stoneheart finds herself slain before ever slitting Walder's throat. But so long as there are Northerners who draw breath, neither will ever truly be able to hold on to their ill-gotten gains. That's the true power of honor in George's world. It's not just the case for Ned either. The one true king is slowly but surely learning this lesson too. Should he defeat the Boltons in the Battle of Ice, his having honored his kingly duty to the Night's Watch and avenging the Boltons' betrayal of the Starks, the Menace will have won the fealty and loyalty of some of the most valuable players in the North. Not a shabby consolation prize after he lost all of his chips over at the Blackwater blackjack table, eh? Disclaimer, the One True King does not have a gambling problem. The One True King can stop whenever he likes.
This message brought to you by the Stannis Baratheon Party. The only thing he gambles on is making a better tomorrow. Vote Stannis.
But while honor is maybe not quite the fool's prize George initially leads you to think it is, this is still a world where cunning will rule the day if you know when to call it quits. And at number 1, and he really is number 1, it cannot be argued against even with a pseudo-philosophical discussion of the value of honor, the biggest winner of the War of the Five Kings was our favorite sellsword, the Bronn of the Blackwater! A poster child for what a measured application of determination and cunning can net you if you put your mind to it and learn not to hit on 19. Lowly sellsword to a High Lord's bodyguard, to Commander of the City Watch, to Anointed Knight, to a noble's spouse, to a guy who, all things proceeding according to plan, has successfully embedded himself into the nobility with land and a castle. Bronn has only climbed higher and higher off the back of this conflict, and is on a hot streak. From the cheap, no-brand brothels to top-shelf ones like Chatea's, Bronn no longer needs the bad... What, Tom? What clip are you using? Oh, you just sent a cringe through my very soul. Bronn is pretty much set, and enjoying the finer things in life. He needn't do any more, and he's had the sense to quit while he's ahead. His current winnings are no longer on the blackjack table, they're not even in the casino. They are firmly in his pocket. Nobody is swearing an oath of vengeance on him, and if they are, good luck. He's not significant enough to be a thorn in anyone's side, and apart from naming Lollis's kid Tyrion for shits and giggles, we'll unlikely hear from him again, since Cersei would rather have Felice Stokeworth killed over revealing her involvement in trying to have the old sellsword offed. If that's not winning, I don't know what is. Bronn did not clean out the casino like many other players are trying to do. He merely went in with $10 on the off chance he might be able to win something, won 100 grand, and decided to call it a day. Well played, Sellsword. Well played. And that's our take. Were there any winners of this conflict we missed? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. What did we get right? What did we miss? And what did we get wrong? I'm sure you'll have no problem telling us. Thanks for watching, guys.